one you choose. To say I've been around is an understatement. From the basement I've crawled up to product placement. Gonna burn this shit down. MX missiles deployed. It's time to get this shit on. It's time to weaponize noise. Kaiju. World moves never idle. I am final. I'm the tide destroying cities and mirrors flying chaos in me. I bring you all the ugly truths to leave you bruised and bleeding. I'm not leaving until you understand. None of this matters in the bigger picture. I am nothing but the sun.
Hello again, it's Brian Prime here. I will remind you delicately once more that you can visit voidsignal.net or patreon.com/voidsignal to help support the Void Signal project. Void Signal is ad-free and powered by me, who is a person, and I got bills to pay. It goes a long way towards helping me, and I greatly appreciate it. Anyhow, I hope you are well. I hope that you enjoy this episode, as usual, and yeah, great. Stay safe, stay loud, and please take care.
Excellent.
Good to hear you. Good to talk to you again. It's been some minutes. How are you? Do you need a minute or are you?
No, I'm good. I do need to apologize though. We're staying with a friend who has cats to which I am allergic, so I may be sneezing some. But
Perfectly fine. Yeah, no worries. Humans have things that happen to them, so perfectly understandable.
Man, these cats are amazing. They're rescues, and this is not her fault, but they're 25 pounds each. They're a pair of brothers. So when they go at it, it's 50 pounds a cat running through a house. It's amazing. They're phenomenal.
Yeah, enormous. It sounds like quite the thing to experience. Well, we can go ahead and get started.
Okay.
We will just, I will do an intro in this case, just to sort of set people up for who you are and what we're going to be talking about today versus last time. So welcome to Void Signal. I'm host Brian Prime. My guest returning to the show, Stephen Archer, but returning to talk not about Stoneburner so much, but about the release of your new book, Red in Tooth and Claw. Your first book. I read it and I reread it recently this past week just to make sure I was like good and refreshed and ready to talk to you about it. It is beautiful. I greatly enjoyed my time with it. It was touching and moving, and the control over the whole narrative that you exercise in it, not just with deliberate word choice and font choice and placement, but also with having control over the entire panels and sort of the way things look and the way things are oriented on the page. Made it a very powerful read, quite a thing to experience. So I will interrupt myself really quick just also to say happy birthday. It was your birthday yesterday. So also the release date for your book. So congratulations on both accounts.
Thanks. It's actually my fourth book.
Fourth book. Okay.
Yeah. But it's understandable because I don't push them. It's just they're kind of few and far between. Over the last 20 years. So yeah, my first one is a kid's book actually called Lunameris.
Oh, that's right. You told me that.
Yeah. And then I did another one that's just kind of a small. I don't even know if there are copies available anymore. I think we might still have a few of them floating around. But a smaller book that's kind of a weird little kind of fairy tale called Red King Black Rook. And then a few years ago, I did an illustrated version of Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. I like to think of it as a collaboration between Poe and myself.
Sure.
He was a very easy man to work with since he didn't have a lot of opinions to force on me, which was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and then this, although this is by far the most ambitious thing I've ever done.
Mhm.
Pretty much across the board of everything I've ever made. I think this is by far the most ambitious of all of them.
Mhm.
Funny that you mentioned the fonts, actually. So when I was putting the thing together, I
Mhm.
couldn't find a font that I felt like really worked well for Red's voice. So the one
Mhm.
that I ended up using is it's my own handwriting.
Mhm.
And I made multiple versions, like I think four different lowercase fonts with two sets per, and then four uppercase fonts with two sets
Mhm.
per, because it bothers me when people use quote unquote handwriting fonts and they repeat letters and they're exactly the same.
Yeah, sure.
So I made multiple ones. So and there are repeats in there, but I tried to keep it as make it less noticeable. So it really does
Mhm.
seem there's more variation from letter to letter.
Mhm.
And I have a friend my friend Ted Wally, who is my kind of a brother from another mother who lives in New Orleans, who has a comic called Matilda,
Mhm.
and is way more in that world than I am.
Sure.
And had him kind of go over it because I was like, "Is this going to work?" He was like, "Yeah, yeah, it's fine." So
Mhm.
it's always good having somebody who knows more than you to go to about that.
Yeah, for sure. And it was noticeable, and in the sense of like this is like lovingly crafted, I guess
Yeah.
is what it adds, is like the attention to detail of not a thing unnoticed. So yeah, very wonderfully done. It is a beautiful story, and your word choice is so deliberate and poignant. And I'm quite a fan of your usage of minimal, sort of very few words to sort of say a lot and evoke sort of bigger ideas and bigger pictures and that kind of a thing. Um, is this was this did you find this to be an easy thing for yourself to write?
Well, okay, so I guess it's best to kind of give it a little bit of history.
Mm,
I wrote about 5 years ago. I was in between record labels,
mm,
and I had just gotten back from my first tour doing because Stoneburner prior to that had been me doing this weird kind of tribal industrial music based on kind of my idea of what dance music on Arrakis from Dune would sound like.
mm,
And I did like 5, 6 albums worth of that. And I was like getting ready to write the next one. And I was like, I could do that again. And my fan base would like it and it would bore the shit out of me. So I decided to write, I'm going to write the industrial record I've been promising I would do. So I did that.
mm,
And I went out on tour with it. And I came back and I've spent my whole life as an artist. And so I tend to be very analytical about how I approach things. And I was thinking about the stage shows and how I felt like I wasn't really conveying the level of, I don't know, conveying the vibe that I wanted. And I kept coming back to this image of like giant predatory apex predator stalking the stage in front of people. And I kind of landed on this idea of one of the wolves from Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf.
mhm,
And so I wrote this one song with kind of bullshit Latin. It was called Lupus Invocat Lupus. And I was to
mhm,
try and kind of bring that out. And that helped to an extent, but I wasn't exactly, I felt like there needed to be more. So I started working on this EP and I tend to give things a bottle before I actually fill the bottle. So I just kind of was reaching around for a title for it, and remembered the line from Tennyson of "Red and Tooth, Nature, Red and Tooth and Claw." So Red
mhm,
and Tooth and Claw, and I also like kind of. I learned years ago that it's difficult sometimes for me to do things unless I have a reason for it. And one of the ways I would do that is like I would book art shows 6 months in advance, things like that. So
mhm.
I actually started pre-orders for it. And I was like, okay, this drops in 2 months. No, I haven't written anything for it, but here we go. So that was a way to kind of bottle that up. And right around the same time, I did this digital drawing of this giant wolf kind of standing in the mountains, looking down on the city, and it was just called the World Wolf. And I kept kind of coming back to that image and thinking about it, and started developing this. I knew that it was somehow going to destroy the city, and but I couldn't figure. I didn't know why yet. And even in that image, it was still, and it's still up in our stores. A print. He's still gray, and so he had yet to acquire his bright red color. And I began to kind of slowly develop the idea for this story, and eventually hit on why the wolf ends up going on this rampage, and blocked out over the course of five or six songs, this whole basic story of how the wolf has been on Earth and basically cultivates humans, helps them develop, and eventually he and after a period of time, he's helped them develop as much as they can, and he and his mate have decided, okay, well we're good with this, we're going to go, and they go to sleep under what eventually become the Rocky Mountains. And he wakes up one day in modern times, and he finds her dying after drinking from this polluted river, and loses his mind, and eventually just tears through a huge chunk of the United States. And eventually she kind of comes to him and says, in spirit form, and says, that's great and all, but it didn't bring me back. And in order for you to keep serving in this role of helping develop people, you need to let them win. You need to, otherwise, what's the point? So he ends up dying by a cliff, and then he and her spirit both kind of go off into space, so into the universe. And so I had developed this entire narrative, and I did some music videos, animated, sort of semi-animated music videos for it. So I had this whole thing. And it was a really great, from a songwriting standpoint, it's kind of very traditional, I think, for people with longer careers to not really run out of their own personal material, but look at other characters and to write from those points of view. And writing from the point of view of this half-mile high giant red chaos god is a really interesting one, because it's completely objective, and you're able to really, I don't know, it just gives you a lot to work with. So I did that, and then put it down for a while, and sort of came back to it a little bit on the record Apex Predator. Anyway, a couple of years later, and we're actually getting to the answer to the question, I started playing around with it again, and kind of realizing that, hey, I can actually develop this into a whole story, because I had it all basically blocked out. And so I knew it was I had, let's say I had 80% of the story written out, and then there was just some nuanced stuff. I had to come up with a reason, where the wolf came from originally. And these are all things that I didn't have to, but I felt for me as an author, I had to figure that out. And so, once I kind of nailed that down, and it was incredibly. My wife is an author, and she has mostly just poetry, but she has written 2 novels. And I was talking to her about it one time, and she was saying, I just kind of watched the movie in my head and then write it down. And I hadn't quite experienced that before, but this was very much like that. I didn't expect it to end up being as long and developed as it was, as it ended up as. But it was very much kind of just really figuring out the process and how the events flowed. And the wolf, I am autistic. It doesn't always come across as, because it's not, I'm not drastically so, but it's very much in there. And the wolf is kind of me at my most autistic. He's really, really intelligent. I mean, he's this thing that has survived the birth and collapse of the universe over and over and over and over. And his role is to just he and along with the other creatures, whatever you want to call them, manifestations of his ilk, their job is to collect ideas and stories and stuff from the life in their regions of the universe, and bring it back to the center singularity, so that when it explodes again, is used as the basis for the next one. So that's how the universe is able to grow. And so he's very, very intelligent, because he knows all this stuff, but he has absolutely no emotional intelligence whatsoever. He just he's never needed it. So the way that he speaks tends to be, his voice is very much the way I tend to think, and that kind of, he's like, he knows what his role is, and so when Cyan, whose her name is never mentioned in the book, but his partner Cyan eventually comes along and starts talking to him and saying, "Hey, how you doing? What's up?" Essentially, he has no idea how to cope with it because he's never, nothing has ever done that before. They've always, people just see him as this god, and he's just doing his thing. So it blows his mind when this tiny little normal sized wolf like starts actually trying to interact with him as an individual. And so I think a lot of I feel like there's a certain amount of interplay between the two voices of the two characters. He's very much, for most of the story, he's like, well, no, this is how things are, and this is what I do. And then he kind of loses his mind, and he also loses his voice. And so for part of the story, he's not telling it. He's kind of collected like the stories vignettes from humans that are living through the wolf destroying the cities and trying to kind of bring the perspective down to this human level. And then Cyan has her own voice, which is much more emotionally intelligent and has much a much better perspective on kind of his actions looking at from the outside. So she's considerably more eloquent. I mean, she begins one of the chapters with, I think it's time for a Dickensian change of perspective, So she's able to kind of look at what he's doing and kind of put it all together for him.
Sure. It does kind of beg the question of, is this the story of yourself and Donna in a way?
There are certainly elements of it. She, when we met, she started trying to talk to me a number of times, and once again, because of that autism, it just never occurred to me that she was hitting on me. And it wasn't until she just turned and straight up just said to me, "Everybody knows I think you're hot." And I was like, "Oh, that's what this is all about. Okay, cool." So there are definitely many elements of that in there. I think that there, I guess you could make, and I hadn't actually thought about this until just now. You could definitely make a parallel with Red having, he knows what his role is, and that's all he does. My whole life has been spent as an artist, and everything has always that it has always been the most important part of what I do, and I, Donna has had to learn over the years that I will I always call it going down the hole. I'm like, look, I'm going down the hole on this. So basically, it's like I might physically be in the same room with you, but I am not there. I am working on this thing, and I will continue to work on this until it is done, which may be a day or a month. And if you try and interact with me during that time, it's going to be a real hit or miss on whether any of it sticks. And so the wolf very much it operates kind of like his focus is that whatever his thing at the time is. And Donna very much is much more aware of the bigger picture in our lives together and our businesses and things like that. So she is like, I don't know, an example would be, she takes care of paying the bills. She comes to me and goes, "Okay, I need X amount of money," and then I go and I make some paintings and I get that money together and I just give it to her and she deals with it and does whatever. So that way, there's definitely a lot of that there. And Donna has also had to learn how to communicate with somebody who doesn't think emotionally very much, and so and to respond to that, because there are one of the fun parts of autism is when you're trying to communicate with somebody and you don't understand subtext. You don't think about subtext. You just tell people what you're thinking, and that any people who don't have that have a hard time kind of going, well, who would just say what they're thinking? We have all of these formal ways that we go about not saying the thing that we're thinking in order to keep everybody's feelings. And I'm just like, I'm just being blunt. Like my whole thinking is, well, I'm trying to just be clear so that we don't have to worry about feelings, so we all just know what's going on and we're all good. I told my drummer one time when he first joined me for a tour, I said, I would love to have you on this tour. I'd love to have you on this tour if you want to come, but and I think it was he didn't, but I was very neutral about it. And I think he felt that I didn't really want him one way or the other. And I was like, no, I just want to make sure you understand this is your choice, because I know you have to go and you have to leave your wife and go and do all of this stuff. So I'm not going to pressure you to do it, but please, I'd love to have you if you do it. So it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of that in how the two of them communicate, and also Red can't talk. So like he can kind of communicate with her, but a lot of it is gestures and things like that. Whereas she can kind of, and he this is it's something that comes up where he's like he knows how he knows that humans, at one point she's trying to explain why she's dying, and he's basically humans have to destroy the mother to understand the mother. Technology and pollution is part of what happens during this particular time in this cycle. And he says, I could explain that to her, but I don't have the words, and she would understand it, but I can't. But I just don't have the words to do it. So that's another kind of interesting.
Sure.
It was an interesting limitation that I had to figure out how to get around.
I do want to, sort of on that note, and a thing that I did want to mention and is relatable and applicable here. When it comes to conveying emotion, or, this has some very beautiful poetic moments in it, some very touching things. But I wanted to, in particular, the chapter that I quite enjoyed the whole thing, but I really fancied the chapter Red, chapter 4, these sort of great little 1 to 2 page vignette, vertical slices of a thing. Here is the sort of large scale impact on very tiny, individual narratives. I love that sort of view, the zoom in from the macro to the micro to see how like this is impacting this person in this way and this person in this other way. And maybe for this person it's banal, and for somebody else it's the worst thing to ever happen to them. I really liked the whole way it was structured and the way to tell that bigger story of, your character is, the Red is now the background for all these other stories. I really liked that.
I'm glad you did, because that's I really enjoyed doing that. And there's so in The Stand by Stephen King, there is one section of it, I remember when I read it, that I really loved. And now that I've been thinking about it recently for some reason, and now that you bring it up, I think it's kind of the genesis of or another example anyway of this idea. There's one point where towards the beginning of the book, where one person is infected with the disease, and it follows progression of from person to person to person to person. And it's set up almost exactly like this dollar bill then went to this other person, which went and talked to this person, and then it did this. And I find that really, I don't know, it's kind of like watching Red Ball from Sesame Street as it goes through its tubes and running along its wires and stuff. That was a lot of fun to do, and it was really interesting kind of doing it, because it happened very fast. Like that whole chunk of story happened really, really quickly, and so I can't even pin down all of them as I go through it.
I mean, I'm looking at them now, and I appreciate like the font changes for many of them, and the setting changes are the art changes, sort of depending upon whose story is being told. And
some of them are really based on real events. I was a bike courier for many, many years, so that's kind of where that happened. One of the stories happens with that. And it also, in a weird way, it helped me deal with some stuff. The story about the photographer, that was based. We used to work with a photographer, and she did all the work for Wart and the Dead and Order of the Reptile, and she was very sick. And one point, I managed to I went over there while she was in the middle of overdosing, and I told her, I was like, it's your life. I'm going to go upstairs for 5 minutes. I'll come back down. If you want me to call to get you help, I will do it. And if you want me to leave, I'll do that too. And she made the choice to have me call, and so I did. But eventually her disease caught up with her and she killed herself. And writing that part of that story was kind of a way of, I don't know, putting a little bit of a bottle on my experience with her, and at least giving her some sort of a life or a death, even. I don't know.
Sure.
And then some of them were just pure, just of the moment. The one about the base jumper was a lot of fun to write. Just kind of watching how that story, watching that little story happen. And then trying to like kind of think through the terrorist one. I really enjoyed too. I don't know. That was one of those ones that happened real fast, and so I don't even remember why it occurred to me that how it would happen. And I love the one with the about the trans girl and her experience. Although I'm sorry that she had to die in the end, but I think it's always good to be able to talk about the joy of finding who you are, even if it's at the last minute.
Yeah, agree. That was one that did stand out because it was and sort of did merit mention. They are all wonderful. I did also like the damn, there was another one that was like stood out. I'm like flipping through the pages right now, but the representations of joy, of like get it while you can get it. Sort of this is what matters to these people. That was a trick that I was taught back in creative writing was, if you want an audience to care about a character, show us what they care about. And make, very well done and throughout this whole section.
Well, I really appreciate that. I've never actually had any formal training in writing. I read constantly. So actually hearing that, honestly, the fact that it got published, but hearing it from people who have gone to school for it or taken classes that actually works from that perspective is really cool, because I've always deeply believed that all art is the same. It's just different tools. And when we started doing, I went to school for art, spent my whole life doing that. And then when I'd been in bands, but I was always coming at it from a songwriter, give me 3 chords, I'll write you some lyrics, singer point of view. And so when we started Ego and we got the gear and started writing actual full-on songs from zero, I had this moment of, can I do this? And I was like, no, it's fine. You already know how to self-critique. It's just figuring out the tool to do it. And so kind of approaching the book, it was a similar sort of thing. It was just make it, write it, and then go out and talk to anybody who's let them critique it and rework it, but get the thing together and make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you mentioned self-critique, and that has been the most valuable tool I think I've ever learned from my time is doing creative. And when I was in school for creative writing, was like being able to recognize that a thing I have made it can be good, but I can recognize that it is not great, and I can be willing to have someone come in and reshape it into a way that is better.
Oh, I love having access to people to edit stuff, and like when I hand any of my stuff off to the publisher and they give it to editors or whatever, I'm always, they'll give me advice here and there, and I'll be like, yes, please tell me what to do to make this better. I am happy to say that for the most part, it is it was just little bits of things here and there. And there were a couple of places where they were like, well, I would change this. And I'm like, oh, those very few places, I'm like, there's a reason that this is written this way. And I'm keeping it that. Even if nobody else knows about it, I know it's there. There's a reason it's written that way, even if it's awkward or whatever.
Gotcha. And that was a thing I did sort of have mentioned a couple of times, but it's I feel is worth revisiting, is the very deliberate word choices in a lot of these sections. I jotted down a few that stood out to me. We have become a vast library of was. I'm such a fan of like minimal sort of romantic philosophical sort of thinking. I also wanted to comment on the fact that a lot of the sort of ambient storytelling, I read the outro at the end of the book and everything. So I know that this sort of incorporates part of your love for science, but as somebody who reading it in the absence of that knowledge, as somebody who also loves science and Carl Sagan and Pale Blue Dot and those sorts of things, it came across very well in the opening pages and had that sort of distilled sort of this is what we have, Pale Blue Dot sort of a feeling to it.
That's cool.
So that was a part of the story that I appreciated very much, of like that sort of your love for science definitely sort of shows through, I think, in a way.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. It was funny because I was, when I was coming towards the end of the whole process, and I was going, doing one of the millions and millions of rereads, And at one point I was like, oh shit, I haven't accounted for the moon. Fuck.
Mhm.
Okay. Because that was like a, relatively speaking, random event. And
Yeah.
so it's like, so he needs to go and bring in the moon. So I went back and did that, just because if he's going to be protecting humans, so he's going to set up a system for that. And then figuring out like just ways of how is it that he is going to really kickstart all of this, because I mean the logic being the faster he can, because he's done this, all of these cycles over and over and over again,
Mhm.
and out of everything in his particular region, humans are the most viable. So the sooner he can get them up and running, the better it is, because the further they can advance, the more ideas they can develop, so that he can take those to the final mind and do it. I have I'm working on kind of a side quill that's Cyan's story. So it's essentially the same story, but just told from her point of view. And one of one part of it is she's looking off in the distance at some of the other curators for the library,
Mhm.
and like he very much has this wolf form because it's kind of based on this archetype for humans. But and since they're the only thing in that region, that's what he ends up as. But she's looking off, and there are these other curators, like, and one of them is like just almost like morphing as it is walking through the universe, constantly shifting shapes, because there's so many different forms of life and ideas in that
Mhm.
particular region that it can't hold one form.
Mhm.
So it's not like, it's almost like this bloated sort of barely holding all of these ideas inside itself.
I like the context that's given for a lot of this stuff. It really helps paint a big. There's a lot of really good ambient storytelling that goes on with just like sort of very little. Big appreciate, greatly appreciate that. The other one I just wanted to mention that just stood out to me was I was not alone until I knew what it was like to be with her.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
when you don't realize, I think when you spend your whole, well, again, you spent what, existence or your
Mhm.
life, like you don't, and you do, like with the autism, and you have that level of focus
Mhm.
until something comes along and kind of puts that in perspective.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like, wow, I hadn't really realized that I was so totally, completely solipsistic, because my assumption was everyone was kind of like that. And
Mhm.
when all of a sudden you have this, one of the reasons that Donna and I have been together for as long as we have is she was the first person I had ever been involved with who essentially grabbed me by the collar and said, I'm not going to let you treat me like an asshole,
Mm.
and you're going to actually have to put effort into this and into to engaging, and you can't just turn me off and come back to me when you're ready. I am here, I exist, and I am now part of your life, and you need to accept that and be ready for that. So that's very much part of that whole idea.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very well said. I like that very much in particular because I don't think you can. I think it's value isn't a thing that you can just give someone, right? Like you can't like just force someone to be snap your fingers and be like, "Hey, value this thing."
Right.
It's a thing that has to be earned or learned, or
You have to, you have to
mhm.
learn it for yourself. You have
Mhm.
you have to see the value in it in
Mhm.
order for it to become real to you, I think is,
Mhm.
otherwise it's just, I was talking to somebody once who was more more mentally ill than my experience. And they were saying how, sometimes I wonder if it would not just be easier to not try and be a good person and get off my meds, so can I could just blame everyone else for it, but I would be happy,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like, well, yeah, that certainly is a choice that you could make, and
Mhm.
yeah, you might be happier in the moment, but then look at all of the other things, all the other damage that you cause. So yes, if you want to do that and are okay with yeah, allowing that to be the trail of fire in your wake, then that's certainly an option. But if you want to try and be a responsible person beyond, and not just kind of a machine responding to chemicals, then yeah, you need to actually deal with those emotions and deal with the responsibility of actually interacting with people.
Mhm. Agreed. Agree. Not always the easiest of things to do.
No, absolutely not. No, it's I'm very intimately familiar with my own problems, and then with people that are around me far worse. And it's always impressive and amazing to me that knowing, just seeing a glimpse from the outside of what's going on inside their heads, and the fact that they manage to the ones who really step up and use those tools that are available and get the help that they need in order to actually be real people and not just a collection of if-then responses.
Yeah. Very well said. Agreed. I don't want to keep you too long, so I will. It's about the time for me to put the last question of the show to you. What is something that you have been enjoying recently? And your answer can be anything: a book, a movie, just what's something you're jazzed about.
So, because I work all of the time, I have to figure out ways to intentionally not be at work. And back during lockdown, I got a hold of a Nintendo Switch, and that was such a great way. I've always enjoyed video games, but that was such a great way for me to I could just pick it up and play a game for a few minutes and then go back to work. And I have since evolved, and now I have a Steam Deck. And for the past 2 weeks or so, I have been playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which has been just a fantastic way to game that I can just pick up and put down as needed. And it's so I've really been enjoying Assassin's Creed Odyssey quite a bit. One thing, just in case you didn't know about this, there are two additional chapters to the book that are DLC. There's a link in the book, and if you need me to, I can send it to you. But it's at the very end, at the very beginning, and the first of the two is called The King of Wolves, and it is the story of the last chapter in the book of Red dying, told from the perspective of a guy in the military who is that had kind of built this encampment around him, watching it, and then what he goes on to do. And that's kind of if I ever get around to writing any of the stories that were on Apex Predator, he is one of the main characters in that. So it's kind of a way of bridging that potential future thing. And that's really written more as just a short story. It's got some illustrations in it, but it's mostly just text.
Gotcha.
And then the second one is, and this is something I really, really enjoyed doing. It's in the form of a magazine called Decade, and it takes place, it comes out 10 years after the events of the story of the book, what they refer to as Lupus Summer. And it's looking looking at different perspective. It's looking at a much more global perspective. It gets into the socioeconomic experiences of what happens when the entire U.S. economy crashes. It gets into I actually interviewed friends of mine who are like experts in their field. One of them is a minister, and one of them is does religious studies, and so it's kind of like, well, what would happen? What would the response of the Catholic Church be? It's like, oh, hey, here's an actual real God. So how are they responding to that?
Right.
I've got a friend who's a high-ranking military guy, and I was like, so here is kind of the layout of the attack plan of how they would be dealing with the wolf. And so that's all presented in the book. It's got the president's address. It's got more short stories of like people who are on the ground and basically trying to reclaim the country. It's got conspiracy theories about with this Alex Jones character kind of going, that's not even real. It's a false flag. The wolf is not. It's impossible. This is what they're really doing. Right. So I just want to bring people's attention to that, because I really I love the idea of footnotes in books and even on records, because I think with part of the ADD is every statement that you make has parentheses in it, because there are all of these other thoughts attached to it. And so this is kind of a cool way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because I'm a big fan of that as well. Like, it was one of the things that I really liked about World War Z, in particular when I first read it, was like here's a journalist, and here's his like the jumping around, and here's the news bulletin.
That was a touchstone for me when I was writing that chapter. Actually, was World War Z, was thinking about those little stories. Yeah.
Yeah, such a huge fan of that. Like, I've always been a fan of like short, weird fiction, and like World War Z was just such a perfect, like, here's these vertical slices of a thing. Have you seen the VHS films?
I have not. Not for any good reason. Honestly,
No, that's totally fine. Just the world is huge. There's a million things to watch and see and do. But they're horror films. I love them for the same reason of like, oh, we found these tapes, and on these tapes are short, weird horror stories of like, oh, these frat dudes stumble upon a satanic ritual on Halloween night on accident, and and then it cuts, and oh, this person is not, and then it cuts, and just the short little oh, I love shit like that. So yeah, big fan of it. Detail.
I'll have to send you a copy of this. Let's say 20 years ago. Jesus, 20 years ago. I had this. I collect things for art supplies, and one day I just bought a bunch of stencils of letters, and I started doing these drawings with these A, B, C, D. And I went to Donna and I was like, "Hey, I got this idea for a book we can do. It's called 26, and instead of it's an alphabet book, and so, but I was like, but we'll do like A is for aftermath, B is for build, C is for catalyst." And the idea was to do the middle part of a story that you don't get the beginning or the end of, and in different forms. Like one of them was a pamphlet for something, or part of an article about something. So I would do all the artwork, and I would give her kind of the structure for it, and then hand it off to her. She would write it and give it back, and I would lay it out. Like one of them was the back of a book cover or a piece of music or whatever. And we did 26 of them. We made physical copies of 26 books. So I printed out all the artwork and her stuff, and then glued them to the pages of these like Time Life encyclopedias.
Yeah.
And so we did 26 of those, and then each one had its own other elements. So there were unique pieces of work using that as a basis. But I have PDFs of one of them.
Oh, that's so rad.
I'll have to send you a copy of it.
Yeah, please do.
Because it was a very cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be interested, because I have debated not debated. I put a little bit of work into starting a short story collection for myself of like my own stories, but with the wraparound narrative of a guy who does body disposal, and everybody that comes in is like, here's the story of this fucking person. Like, I'm such a sucker for anthology horror films for the same reason of like, here's this story that we get to know. Like, oh, I love stories. So yeah, I would
like
definitely.
Books of Blood, but founded in a different thing. Yeah.
Oh, I loved Books of Blood.
Oh yeah, they were fantastic.
Brilliant. You did mention Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I did play a lot of that one myself. I love Greek mythology and the Odyssey and everything, so I loved playing through it. You actually mentioned, because we're friends on Facebook, and you mentioned the Mad Max game not long ago, and I ended up reinstalling it and playing through it like just in time to watch Furiosa and everything. And it is turning out now that I may end up going to Wasteland Weekend in September, so like just in time for all the shit. But man, that's I guess that's going to be my answer of what I'm enjoying recently, is that Mad Max game is fantastic.
Cool. Yeah. When you find something like that really sucks you, because I go through a lot of video games because I'm always looking for something. Once again, just to be able to turn my fucking brain off.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who also has ADD, at one point, he just responded to something. He was like, "Oh, that's right. You get a choice of what to think about." And I don't know if for those people who don't experience some form of ADD or my wife has OCD, like the real legit kind, not the, oh no, this something is slightly off or whatever. She's got a intrusive thought kind of thing. And so having these respite of places where you can kind of, like, I get to do that when I'm painting or when I'm working in the studio with the Beast or playing games, where I get to like turn off brain and let instinct drive. So I'm always looking for that thing, and it's so frustrating when you can't find it. And so when you do, it's something I really try and, like Witcher 3, Baldur's Gate, this AC game, God of War, the recent. I haven't played the new one. It comes out for PC real soon, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
But those have all been like, okay, I can get lost in somebody else's world. It's like a good book,
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it has been nice to just sort of like, and especially like with a game that like, especially in your case, using the Steam Deck, having a controller in your hands and just like a thing that like, vibrates every now and again and something just like you can put your
That's
feet
actually
up.
really new to me. That's been a whole new. I've never been a console gamer, so
Mhm.
I grew up on Quake, so I was used to playing with my keyboard.
Yeah.
Right. So having it's taken me a really long time to get used to using the control systems,
Mhm.
but I'm finally kind of nailing it. But yeah, but it is just being able to pick it up and put it down
Yeah,
real
yeah.
quick.
And I've been mouse and keyboard for most of my, time playing games, but, had consoles here and there, but like, getting a controller for like the PC so that you can put your feet up and just like
Mhm.
take a minute. Yeah. Makes a huge difference. Really nice to like just sit and have a thing in your hands you're doing a thing with. Like it does wonders for the mind at times. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other
Mhm.
thing I just want to give a quick shout out
For
to.
sure.
The book at the beginning, the forward is by my friend Peter Watts.
Mhm.
Peter Watt is one of my favorite authors, and he wrote this book called Blind Sight, which is what I based certain amounts of not the first Stoneburner, but the first industrial Stoneburner record, Technology Implies Belligerence. Has a lot of stuff based on Blind Sight. And when I refer to footnotes and books and stuff, the reason I loved that book was because as I was reading, I had to stop every few pages and go look up the concepts. And the thing I love about it is all the concepts are real, just extrapolated like 100 years in the future.
Mhm.
And I liked it so much, in fact, that I started writing him, and then eventually booked a show in Toronto specifically to go meet him. And and he also ended up writing a short story that we did an audiobook of, based on one of the songs on Apex Predator, that's on for contracting Iris that Donna did. But so having him involved, being able to have him read that or write that forward was huge. I'm it's a so just talking about that he was, prior to being an author, he was a biologist. And so like, for whatever fantastic things may happen in his books, the science is always dead on.
Sure.
And that's something I really, like I said, do try and have it. So having him involved with that and was very cool. It was funny, we were just up there recently during Donna's book tour, and we were talking about all of it. And he was like, you never did actually account for the fact that a creature that big would collapse under its own weight. And I was like, well, yeah, it's true, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. Like
Yeah.
I'm letting that one slide.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so just having that.
I'm a fan of
Anyway,
that too, especially in the case of like, I read a lot of Michael Crichton, and that was the thing. I always like,
Oh yeah.
my expectation is most of this is, research or what have you. And like, he uses smart talk in the beginning of the book. I feel convinced after, after I've read it. So yeah, sure. Sounds good to me. But yeah, I agree with that. But that is a thing that I do sort of use. There's a line in the book itself, in your book, that you mention. Sometimes it was this height and sometimes it was that height.
Yeah.
And it seems so fantastical. And it was like, well, yeah, of course it does, because this is a mythos. This is,
Right.
sort of, so those rules can be bent when we need them to be. And
Eventually I decided that the angrier he gets, the bigger he gets. So, but ultimately, that's the real version of it. The secret Stephen version is that he is as big as he needs to be for the best look of the image. Whatever the best is, however it's going to translate best visually, that's how big he is.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, got to get all the good angles. That's understandable.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly.
Real quick, I will ask this question too, because it did pass my mind as I was reading it. And you mentioned audiobook. Is there a audiobook for this going to happen?
So I've got a couple of things in the work, actually. There's this guy that I know, who's actually an author, who's put out by our publisher, who is just a beast of a man, and he's got the voice that goes along with it. And I've currently got him recording the first 3 chapters, and I'm going to put it together. There's a I'm not a comics guy, so I don't remember what the term is, but it's like an animated, semi-animated version of the comic.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
And so I'm going to be doing that. The entire reason I started writing this sidequel for Cyan is because I wanted to do an audiobook of it, of Red, but it's not really set up for it. So I've got 2 different versions going. One where that's kind of a novelization of the book, where it's got more descriptions and more pieces of information, and I've got Cyan's thing. So we'll see. I know her narrative, but it's figuring out other weird little aspects of it. Like, I had to figure out why she gets caught. Like that, I know, and work within the limitations that are already presented by the actual book that's out now. So, like, I had to actually figure out who catches her and why, and what their intent is. I also had to figure out why she goes from being a normal sized wolf to as big as he is.
Right.
Which actually finally I did. Here's a weird one though that I had to figure out, because part of the reason I wanted to write this is because because she's a good character, and I didn't want her to just be, what's the term, a Mary Jane. I think it's in horror where like her entire role is just to be his girlfriend, and I don't like that idea. And I even imply, like, she's one of the weird things that the wolves have very selective memory. Like, they only know what they need to know at any given time. But there's an allusion to her in the first chapter arriving on the planet in the form of this blue meteor that strikes and kind of gives him this weird sense of comfort, but he doesn't know why. So she is also some part of this cyclical thing. But I had to figure out a reason for her to be part of that. And I finally came down to one. And once again, it's good enough that I feel okay. Like, so Red's job is to collect all of these ideas and stuff. And then the universe in general is kind of a self-cleaning, in that, as you know, we reach heat death, the stars expand, creating black holes. All of the matter goes into the black holes, and then it recoalesces into the center.
I do remember that. Sorry to interrupt you. I do remember that line you mentioned, because it was describes it across the sky as the word you used, and I was
describes an arc across the sky.
Love that. Yeah.
Thanks. And so her role in the universe is to then, like, basically she clears out any remaining matter that misses. So it was like, it's not the most elegant solution, but it works well enough, and it gives her a reason to be part of this. Her and I guess her ilk to be part of this cycle. And there's kind of a dream sequence that happens in her book, where she's kind of seeing all of this stuff for the first time and starting to kind of recognize her place, and she just goes through that doggy joy of chasing a ball, and then just knocking it and chasing it, knocking it, chasing it, and so that's kind of alluding back to this bigger role that she has in the universe. So my hope is that if I can solve all of the problems, all the story problems, to make it happen, it actually worked out kind of nicely. I'm putting that part is kind of where she gets captured is sort of in northern Africa, and there was actually a wolf god, and she's going to get mistaken for that, and they're going to capture her to try and use her in war. So that works out. So now I just need, like, a priest has been notified that she exists, and he's going to try and figure out how to catch her. That's kind of where I'm at in writing the story.
Gotcha. Okay. So more to come from the sound of it.
I hope so. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see if it. I'm very mercurial with this stuff. I'm sure. Like, I've got a bunch of it written out, and then at some point, like, I'm going to sit down, and something will pop into my head. Go, oh, okay, right, we need to go back and do that. But I also have, like, 2 other kids' books that I've been sitting on for, like, years that I need to go back and finish. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, hopefully I can make it happen. And honestly, like, if this book, so I've made a lot of stuff, and we've always kind of we live down here in this tiny little genre that the real world doesn't even market to,
Yeah.
But I think this book might matter outside of our world, and so I'm really hoping we have some tricks we are trying to pull with promotion to get it in front of some some people that may be able to like get it out more into the real world. And if we can do that, that will certainly be an incentive. Because as a person who has always had very kind of stunted emotions, low emotional affect, as I was getting reviews back from people, and having many people just kind of going, well, it made me cry twice. I started to kind of go, hey, this might actually be something that could matter to people in a real way. So my hope is that I can get out there past just our little fan base and maybe into the real world, and if that happens, then there's going to be a lot more incentive to do all that stuff.
Yeah, I hope so for your sake. It did make me cry as well. It was, and I certainly hope that it. This is the thing that I would want the teenage versions of ourselves to find in a comic book shop and take home and become obsessed with. This is the thing that I would want younger Brian to read and sort of help understand. So
thank you so much. That's what an incredible compliment.
Yeah, thank you. This was a wonderful. This has enriched my life to read. So thank you so much for writing it, and I'm sure I speak for everybody else who gets to read it. So
thanks. Just real quick, the website for it is www.redandtoothandclawed.art, which apparently you can get now. And just from a marketing standpoint, Facebook hasn't put clamps down on it, so when I actually post a website address, people see it, which is pretty cool. But yeah, redandtoothandclawed.art. It's got the first couple chapters that you can read on it. It's got links to the rapidly selling out limited editions, links to the record, the videos. There's this cool little 3-minute summary that explains the story as much as I can in 3 minutes. And please check it out. The Stoneburner record of the same name was just re-released with a new song sung from Cyan's point of view that I actually did cry halfway through singing, and I left that take in it because it works, and it's the moment that he is dying, and she has to kind of talk him through that experience. So that's out from Cop International, who have been incredibly supportive. I will be doing the last dozen, I think, shows on the Pig Tour coming up in November, which is basically East Coast and some of the Midwest. So I'll just be on that section of the run. And then hopefully next year there will be some other really cool touring things that we're talking about. But it's going to do whatever I can to bring it to people. So.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. And that your message arrives out to the people. I will do my part in that. Thank you so much for your time and for coming and talking to me about this. And
no, thank you. Thank you for a great interview. Thank you for actually well thought out questions and not just, hey, what are your influences?
Yeah. Yeah, my pleasure. It was wonderful to get to read the book and pick your brain and hear your thoughts about it. I will let you enjoy the rest of your evening. I will put this out within the next 2 to 3 weeks or so. And if you have
Void Signal intro and outro courtesy of Processor. Visit processor2.bandcamp.com for more Processor, and visit voidsignal.net to help support the creation of more Void Signal. Stay safe, stay loud.